Assigning color IDs in Maya. Here's a high poly thing that I've made. It's got a bunch of different pieces. Let's assume that when we want to bake this thing, that we want some parts to be concrete, some parts to be gold, silver, other stuff. I'm going to show you the wrong way to do it the first time, and then I'll show you the right way to do it. However, I'm going to show you the right way to assign IDs right now. So grab a piece, right click, assign favorite material, pick Lambert. You can pick anything, but Lambert is just the simplest one. Let's name this concrete. Then let's go to the color. And you want to pick very contrasty colors so that in Substance Painter you'll be able to color pick that, and Substance will be able to differentiate between different colors. Because like if you pick, you know, a bright green and then this green for something else, it's going to have a really hard time when you're trying to use levels adjustments to pull apart the pieces. So concrete is that color green. Let's say we want this to be concrete as well. So right click, existing material, because we already made concrete, and we'll drop that on there. Let's say we want this to be wood. So, favorite material, Lambert. We can call this wood. It doesn't matter what you call these, but it's just, it helps you to remember what you're doing. Let's pick this as red. That one's done. And over here I haven't broken this piece off over here because I want to show you, you can actually go into component mode with right click, radial menu, face, and let's just select these pieces. And with these pieces selected, we can go back to the radial menu with right click, existing material, wood, and that will be assigned that color there. So for this, let's say we want, let's just call it silver. Favorite material, Lambert. Give it any color you want. Now these have already been grouped together. You should know how to group things together by now, but if you don't, here's a cube. We'll duplicate this cube. Two separate pieces, right? Select them both. Shift, right click. Where is combine? Right there. So now they're one piece. Basically, these were all separate pieces, and then I combined them. So we'll delete that. Same thing as before. Favorite material, Lambert. Pick a color. Same thing again. I think G would work here. So yeah, just hit G, and that'll do the last command you gave. So the last thing we did was assign a new material. We will call this, I don't know, a thing. And I don't think I named the last one, but it's not a big deal. And this last arrow piece. What do we got left? Let's pick, can we do orange? No, that's going to contrast with, or not going to contrast with that yellow, so let's pick something else. It was just a really deep blue. Even that's not perfect, but that'll still be fine. Alright, so let's marquee select this. Go to File, Export Selection. I'm going to call it object bad underscore high. These settings should be fine. Export selection. I'm going to overwrite what I already have there. Then I've got all these guys on a layer, so I'm going to hide that layer and then show you that I also have a low poly here with 3 pieces. Each one of these pieces, if you click on the Attributes tab, has low poly object material on it. It's not too important that you name this specifically whatever you want it right now. But I'll show you that this comes into play in Substance, just so you know what material you're working on. Go back to Channel Box. Marquee select, same deal. Export selection. We're going to call this one the object bad low. Export that, overwrite. Then we'll come into Substance Painter. Let's go to File, New. Select, we'll grab our low, object bad underscore low. Open that up. 2K document resolution, DirectX is fine, at least for this. You'll see low poly object. This is your material that we had set to the low poly. Turn this over. Texture settings, layers, you want to find texture settings. They should be docked over here. but we're going to go down to Bake Mesh Maps, and then this is your baking window. We've got normal, world space, ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, thickness. We want output size. Let's have it at 2K for this. High poly parameters. We want a high poly mesh, so high poly definition mesh. Click this little page, grab the high, open. We're not going to use a cage for this. We'll use a cage when we do it the right way. Relative, average, normals, ignore back face. Sure. We don't need to match by mesh name because we don't have bake groups. We'll have bake groups in the next one. Anti-aliasing. I'm going to leave this off just to show you why you want it on later. World space ID. Okay, so we had our IDs set to material color. If you're bringing in a mesh from Substance, or not Substance Painter, if you're bringing in a mesh from ZBrush, you would use vertex color, but we're using material color. So make sure you have that clicked. Ambient occlusion. These should be okay just for what we're doing right now. Let's hit bake. You're going to see a lot of errors, and I'm going to point those out to you and show you how to fix them. So right away, you can see this shading here. This is due to anti-aliasing not being on. Same problem right here. And without a cage and without bake groups, what's happening is the mesh is being bombarded with ray traces from all directions. And what the ray traces are doing is they're detecting where the high poly is, and then they're putting that high poly detail into the UVs. The UVs are right here, of the low poly. So in the high poly, if you remember, we have this piece right here, this little rim around it, was intersecting with this little knob thing. So that's what we're seeing right here. We're seeing that coming through, and it's causing an error. This is more anti-aliasing errors. Let's show you that material IDs did work, though. That's what we're here for. Okay, so material IDs worked. Even doing things the wrong way, we did do the material IDs the correct way. So assign materials to your high poly, as we did in Maya, then come in here and make sure that when you're in Bake Mesh Maps, in your ID, you have color source selected to material color. And now, I'm going to show you how to bake things properly using bake groups, cage, which is very important, and we'll also crank up the anti-aliasing where we'll get rid of, let's go back to the material, where we will get rid of these little things here. Alright, back in Maya, we've got these three meshes here. We've got the rings, the bulbs, and the base box. So we're going to make bake groups and a cage, and then we're going to bake everything correctly so we don't get any baking errors. So when you're baking, any low poly that intersects with each other should be broken into different bake groups. Because if they're intersecting, they're going to cast rays onto each other, and you're going to get those errors we saw earlier. So let's move this to the side, and I'm going to turn on the high poly. So the rings are all one mesh. They're going to be one bake group. So we want whatever high poly is going to be within them to also be its own group. So we click these rings. I've already combined them. They're their own group. Same with these bulbs here, which that's over there. I'm going to center pivot that. If you need to know center pivot, that is in Modify Center Pivot. So those are their own thing, but if we remember when we were selecting the box, it's all a bunch of different meshes. So we can marquee select the whole high poly, and then control marquee out that, and just control click that. Then we will shift radial menu combined. It'll take a second. And then we want to snap this back to our origin, so we'll tap D, and I believe it is hold down X and middle mouse button to snap it around, and then pull it into the middle. And you can tap W to go back into move mode. So that created some history over here. We can just delete history. I've made a shortcut. I believe that is in Edit, Delete by Type History. So let's name our bake groups. We will call this, well, that's certainly not the lid, we'll call that box high. Call these rings high. Okay, good, that's still there. Forgot to name these. and I call that nubs high. And that's high as in hello, we want high as in high poly. So we'll hide that for a second. Okay, that's another thing, is when you have things on a layer and you group select and you combine, it's going to jump them off the layer. So let's select all this again. If you're using layers, you can do this and then just add selected objects and then it'll hide again. Let's move these guys back over. They were translated into Z. We'll just tap 0. We'll jump back. So this is very important when we do this. Your low poly's name has to match the high poly's name. So this is box underscore low, as you see here. We had box high just a moment ago. This should be nubs underscore low and rings underscore low. That's all good. So let's marquee select our low poly. And we're going to hit Control G to jump them into a group. And we'll call this box mesh. I believe that should still be on that layer. Yep. High poly. Make sure we have 3. Marquee select. Rings, nubs, box. Same thing. Control G into a group. We'll call this box mesh. And I should have done box mesh low and box mesh high. Okay, so let's make sure that everything is at the origin. So we'll select all this, tap D again. Yeah, we'll see centers are here. So X, middle mouse button, drag it around so it'll snap, and then snap into the middle. Tap W. Hit freeze transformations, which you can go to modify freeze transformations. Default is fine. And then we're going to export this as object good high. Actually, wait, before we do that, we don't want to select all the children of the group, so we just want to select the group when we do that. Export, or again, you don't have my shortcut. File, export selection. So object good high. Let's go ahead and hide this. And where was, I believe, did we put it in here? Yes. Okay. Box mesh low, same deal. Marquee select, tap D to make sure all of our centers are correct. Hold down X, middle mouse button to snap around, bring it to the middle. W, freeze transform, delete history, why not? File, wait. Box mesh low, make sure to select the group, the parent, not the children. File, export selection. And we're going to do object good low. Okay, now we're going to make the cage. So we can select that. Actually, maybe we can just do that. Control D for duplicate. We're going to hide box mesh low with just tap H. And here's this. So we're going to rename this cage, and then all of its children cage as well. I'm thinking of a Nicolas Cage joke. I'm not going to say it. Okay, so that's all good. Now we will right-click vertex. Oh, that didn't work. Let's select all the children and then right-click vertex. That won't work either. Let's just marquee select vertex. Okay. Okay, marquee select control radial menu vertex. Okay, now it works. So we can just marquee select all these vertices, double click your move box or move tool, and the tool settings should come up. Normally we work in object, world, or component, but we want to work in normal when we're making a cage. And then your gizmo will turn into U, V, and N. So we want to pull out the N, or push it that way, I guess, and you'll see it expand. By doing this, the vertices are moving outwards on their normal axis rather than just being expanded in world space or object space. This is going to give you the maximum projection volume. So another thing you need to check is to make sure that your cage encompasses not only your low poly, but your high poly. So let's turn our high back on. And as you can see, a little bit of it's kind of poking out. So that wouldn't get baked properly. So we can click our box cage mesh, go back into vertices. They're already still selected. And pull it out just a little bit more. Now these, the rings and nubs are fine being this extruded. You really don't need them this far out, but just for the sake of showing you, you can select different meshes and give it different volumes. So we'll actually pull that in just a little bit. And even if you wanted, let's say there was a really tight corner that wasn't like going your way, you could just select a specific vertex and pull it out. Also, you aren't locked into just using normal. You can actually go into object space and you can pull vertices around on your cage and it'll still work just fine. But using the normal setting is just a quick, just grab them all and go kind of cage. That's the default cage setting that you'll find in most. Like say in Marmoset, their cage automatically just goes out, averaging. So that's fine. We'll minimize that. Looks like this encompasses everything. So let's make sure this is box mesh cage. Everything is cage. Let's grab everything. Oh, the high's still on. Let's grab everything. We're going to make sure freeze transformations. Real quick, we're going to tap D. Oh, actually, so when you tap D, you'll notice nothing moves. We want to open this back up. We want to make sure everything is on object. Grab it again, then press W for move. Tap D, and everything is where it needs to be. So then we'll grab the parent, export, object good underscore cage, and export that. And if I did everything right, everything should work fine when we bake in Substance Painter coming up. Back in Substance Painter, let's just start a new project. So File, New, select our file, our low poly. We want object good low. Let's hope it's good. Hit OK. We're going to discard our changes here. Go to texture settings again, bake mesh maps. And then 2K is fine. We'll find our high poly, click the page, object good high. We want to use a cage and then hit the page file or the page button, and we'll grab our object good underscore cage. These are fine, relative bounding box, fine, average, normals. Match, we want to match by mesh name. That's what we did setting up in the outliner. We are matching by mesh names here. Anti-aliasing, we're going to set that to 4. The suffixes are high and low, so that's what we just did back in Maya. Let's output size to 4K just for fun. World space normal, no parameters, ID, again, from vertex color to material color. Ambient occlusion, which is right there, I don't know why I scrolled up. We can crank that up just a little bit for display purposes. Ignore backface. So ignore backface is when we bake. Let me bring back Maya again. If a ray ends up casting through a cage or a low poly or anything else, but on the back side of the normal, let's close this real quick. Let's say if it hits going this way through the back side, if ignore is not turned on, it will read that data and it will give it a completely black value. For the sake of shadows, when we have things completely intersecting, in real life, if things are overlapping each other and completely touching, there would be no light there. So ignore backface, turn that off if you want complete dark shadows where they would normally be dark. Otherwise, if you leave it on, you'll get a little bit of a white line around it, and I guess I can just show you that. So we'll leave ignore on for now. Self-occlusion means objects will occlude with each other, I believe the entire asset, unless we have different materials. We don't have different materials, so just leave that on. Curvature is fine here. Position, I don't know why I clicked that. Yes, leave that on. Thickness, we don't really need. And let's bake. This might take a minute, so I'll probably speed up through this. And it's done. Did things fix? Let's investigate. Okay. So here's that white line I was talking about. With AO, when we are ignoring back faces, we're not going to get a completely dark line here, and it's actually easier to see right here. We would want darkness there. However, all the bake errors are fixed. Cool. Okay, so with IDs, we can do this. Go over to layers, grab a fill. Let's give this fill a color. Red, why not? Add a black mask. Then on the mask, if we've got the layer here and then the mask here, we'll click the mask. We will right click and we will add color selection. So we can see our ID mask right here and then a button to pick color. And here are all of our IDs. We will just pick, well, green, why not? And all the stuff that was concrete, if you remember, is now red. So yeah, our IDs work. We have a perfect bake. Well, near perfect. Yeah. Let's show you the ignore backface thing. So we'll go back into bake mesh maps. My bake took way too long, so we're gonna go back down to 2K. And with ambient occlusion, we'll put the raise down. That's not even a lot of raise. Normally, like when I'm doing production stuff, I'll do like 512. But it took a lot longer than normal. Ignore backface, uncheck that. And then we'll uncheck these. We just want to do an AO. And then we'll do bake. This should be pretty quick. Alright, the bake is done, and now you can see we're getting a more true AO here. But I just realized that our low poly mesh doesn't have enough topology to actually capture the perfect circle of the high poly. Because remember, this is actually just high poly data that we're projecting onto low poly. So in the high poly, if you remember, it's actually a very smooth bell shape. So we're getting a completely black outline of that smooth bell shape. But when we start putting materials on this, like let's just throw a concrete. Sure, why not? Like, it's barely noticeable. And then with that AO, you'll be able to drive smart masks and stuff like that. So it'll still be useful, but I don't know. You can add more topology if you want, or you can go to the ignore backface route, whatever you want. So I hope you learned something. Yeah, have fun making stuff.